5 years after the start of the revolution, and Egyptians are back on the streets. Some say life has got worse for them on many levels since they told Hosni Mubarak he was no longer wanted. Just what went wrong, and can Egyptians retrace their steps to recover their lost revolution? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. On the 25th of January 2011, tens of thousands of Egyptians took to the streets demanding bread, freedom and dignity. 18 days later, longtime President Hosni Mubarak was toppled. Some thought Egypt had changed forever. But 5 years on, you could be forgiven for thinking that not much has changed at all. The country that sometimes thinks of itself as regional leader is hardly looked to as an example at present. President Sisi's opponents accuse him of an old-school authoritarian style. Some say the state has become even more repressive than under Mubarak. In the run-up to this anniversary, the security forces rounded up more activists and searched thousands of homes in central Cairo. But on Sunday night and on Monday, demonstrators in some areas of the capital and in Alexandria defied an official ban on protests and came out onto the streets, though not in Tahrir Square, which was the epicenter of the revolution. There, some people came out to support Egypt's current leader. Well, President Sisi says Egypt is progressing under his leadership, one step at a time.
Democratic experiences don't mature overnight, but through an accumulative and continuous process of adding experience day after day. Egypt today is not the Egypt of yesterday. We are building together a modern, developed, civilian state that upholds the values of democracy and freedom.
Well, let's bring in our guests. Joining me here in the studio in Doha is Shehata, Associate Professor of Middle East Politics and International Relations at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Good to have you with us. In London, Salah Abou-El-Fadl, member of the Social Democratic Party in Egypt, and in Istanbul, Nader Omran, member of the Freedom and Justice Party and member of the Muslim Brotherhood. A warm welcome to you. Let me start off with you, Nader Omran. Are Egyptians still in a revolutionary mood?
Yes, I think so. The revolution started in January 25th, 5 years ago, and it's still going on ever since. People are still in the street to get back what they have asked for 5 years ago, and also which was stolen by the coup generals 2.5 years ago. So people are still on the streets, even though there is oppression and repression and use of excessive force. They have, just today, they have killed 2 extrajudicially, and they killed 3 as well during demonstrations. So it means that the revolution is still there. It has not complete, it hasn't been completed yet, and people are still struggling to get their freedom from this military regime, which has got much worse than Mubarak's era.
You say their revolution was stolen from them. Do you think they can reclaim the revolution?
Definitely. This will happen one day, but we don't know, actually, we don't know when, today or tomorrow, but we are 100% sure that we have a fair cause and we have a fair revolution, which is so peaceful and so righteous. So one day or another we will prevail and we will win. So we are now in a new wave of revolution 5 years ago, and there is no revolution has stayed on the streets more than 5 years. So this means it's a very big revolution and very peaceful one, and it is the one excuse me, it is the one which will achieve the goals of the Egyptian people one day or another. Yeah.
Shehata, is there the popular enthusiasm for another uprising?
I don't think so. I think that if we look at Egypt today, we see many of the things that Mr. Omran said. There's certainly disappointment and a lack of achievement with regard to the bread, freedom, and social justice. There are thousands of political prisoners and a new phenomena of disappearances, a closing of political space, journalists in jail, and so on. But I think one of the things we also see is a very polarized society and a very polarized body politic.
And we didn't see that 5 years ago, did we?
One thing that we saw in 2011, of course, was people from all political persuasions, liberals, secular, Islamists of different stripes, Salafis and Muslim Brotherhood and so on, businessmen, professionals, all unite about one thing, and that is Mr. Mubarak has to go. Unfortunately, after that was partially achieved, there was an incredible dissent and confusion and chaos and a polarization and a political system that was not functioning. And we saw in the case of the subsequent years, elements that were previous beneficiaries of the regime, particularly the military and the security and forces and so on, take power back, essentially, not fulfill the promises of the Egyptian 2011 uprising.
Salah, Abou-El-Fadl, how polarized the society there, which is evident on all levels, and yet there is still a desire, as expressed by Nader Omran, to bring down Sisi, to continue with the revolution. Does Sisi believe that this could actually happen?
Well, I don't think Nader Omran is speaking for the Egyptian people. He is speaking for the Muslim Brothers, which is his right. But he can't claim to talk in the name of the Egyptian people. That's one thing. Of course, the Egyptian revolution sadly failed so far to achieve the three goals, the bread, freedom, and dignity, for mistakes that happened on the part of all the forces that contributed to it. The Muslim Brothers bear a huge responsibility because they tried to hijack the revolution to themselves, and when they got to power, all the Egyptian political spectrum was prepared to work with them. But once they got into power, they took over and they wanted to exclude everybody, and they had designs on dismantling the normal state and to change the course of history in the country. So that was a big mistake, and it showed that political Islam has no future in Egypt or in the area. And it would be right for the Muslim Brothers to take stock and just pause and think and learn the lessons. Political Islam in the whole world has turned into a nightmare. And so what happened in Egypt when the Egyptian people rejected the Muslim Brotherhood, it effectively ended the tide of the revolution. And unfortunately, we had to go back to nearly the square one, which is that we have a government now that is similar to what we had prior to the revolution. I don't call it a military coup. I don't call it a military government, because it is not. And the change happened by the majority of the Egyptian people who went on the street on the 30th of June. So unfortunately, that's the result of the mistake of the Muslim Brothers. However, all the other political forces were in this array, as you said, and as Mr. Shehata had said, and they never produced a credible alternative to an army-backed regime. And therefore, we had to go to square one because there was a serious threat, and still there is a serious threat of terrorism in Sinai and on the western borders in Libya. And that's a very significant factor behind the increased sense of security in the country and the crackdown on many people, which is not welcome, is not
Okay, sorry, you raised many points. So let me just put one first to Nader. What do you make of the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood is to blame as well, alongside many of the other players, for what's happening in Egypt today, for the decline in Egypt and its economy and social structure?
I think I'm not discussing a kind of points of view now, but I'm just discussing information. Let me tell you one thing. It's naive to say that Muslim Brotherhood has not made mistakes during the 1 year in power. But it's much, much more naive to say that this military coup was the result of the Muslim Brotherhood's performance during this 1 year. Military coup was decided and pre-planned from day one, from February 11th. And it was really applied and took place on January 3rd. And with the help of so many people who are saying that they are revolutionaries who supported the military regime. So it's by the book. It's a military coup. Nobody can deny this. That's not my point of view. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the Egyptian people. Muslim Brotherhood, even there was anybody else in power apart from
I don't think anyone's denying it, but I think
the
Muslim
military, they were going to be
into the military's hands.
Well,
Sorry?
I think there's no question that Mr. Morsi's year in power was a disastrous year in power for him. And he certainly overplayed his hand. I mean, you'll remember that he took extra constitutional measures to pass a constitution that was really not to the liking of the majority of Egyptians in December 2012 and so on. And there were also just incompetence in terms of government. So there's no question that he became increasingly unpopular, and we know that. At the same time, that doesn't justify a military takeover, even though there were millions of people who went onto the street on June 30th. In fact, more people who went onto the street that day than in any day of the 18 days of the Egyptian Revolution. But it was, in the end, a coup. As it were, a non-democratic transfer of power. And more importantly, I think, is that the amount of violence and repression that took place afterward not only is unforgivable, but that has really scarred the Egyptian body politic in a way, in a profound way that people don't realize, that makes it even worse than square one. Because at square one, we didn't have this trauma. We didn't have this deep division, as you're seeing in the two guests and as many others. Now we have this deep trauma in Egyptian society and much blood. And in fact, the current government has some popularity. There's no question about that. It has some significant popularity. Part of it has to do with the real threat of security of the so-called Islamic State or the Sinai province. That's what they're calling themselves now, and other instability. At the same time, however, the regime has been, and friends of the regime, have been using a kind of nationalist discourse to silence any kind of criticism, any kind of dissent, and to make any kind of criticism somehow seem destructive or anti-Egyptian or even, or worse, treasonous and so on. And that silences many people who aren't members of the Muslim Brotherhood, aren't opponents or supporters and so on, but just want a genuinely democratic and free Egypt in which there isn't torture, in which there isn't people disappeared, in which there is rule of law, in which there is dignity for citizens. And I think that's something that I hope all the three of us can agree on.
Okay, well, I think it's a good time to remind ourselves of what happened and look at what the 2011 revolution meant to Egyptians and how they feel about it now. Al Jazeera's Osama bin Javed reports.
It was supposed to be a new dawn as millions of Egyptians came together. People from all faiths, backgrounds and ages united in the call for change. Nearly 50% of Egypt's population is less than 24 years old, so the youth were the driving force of the revolution. Even opposing football fans, the Ultras Ahlawi and the White Knights, joined the protests. And it started with a tech-savvy generation that galvanized crowds through social media and mobile phones.
The youth were the leaders of what was happening. And also we were not really into politics, so we didn't really care or know much about politics, who's right wing, who's left wing. We just knew this is wrong and we should speak up to that. And that's exactly what happened.
It was a period of demanding political freedom. Even walls became canvases. It was much later that organized groups and political forces joined the protesters, all calling for an end to decades of tyranny and injustice. But in the 18 days it took to force Hosni Mubarak to step down, hundreds of protesters were killed. Since then, an elected government has been replaced by the military, and new stricter laws now restrict dissent and protest. Many of those who became icons of the revolution are either in exile or in jail. Some feel the very outrage which fueled the revolution also deflated it.
The same tool that united us to topple dictators eventually tore us apart.
People like Nobel Peace Prize winner and former Vice President of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, are living outside the country. A prominent blogger and pro-democracy activist, Abou-El-Fadl, has been jailed for 5 years for violating protest laws.
He almost hit me, he just missed by an inch.
Mustafa remembers the crackdown at Cairo's Tahrir Square and its aftermath. But despite feeling betrayed, he says he also has a sense of accomplishment.
We always blame the previous generation how they never really moved up to what's going on. They never talked about all the corruption, about the Mubarak regime and all of that. I think there will be a revolution happening within the next maybe 5 years. That will happen.
5 years on, a blood-stained chapter in Egypt's history continues to overshadow what many Egyptians saw as the People's Revolution. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
Salah, maybe you can explain to us what Sisi is worried about, the fact that he rounded up so many people ahead of this anniversary. A speech in December as well, he accused those calling for a new revolution of trying to ruin this country and destroy the people. What is he referring to?
Well, he is a very cautious man, and he has taken power after what Mr. Shehata rightly said has been a very traumatic experience over the past 5 years. So there's a great deal of instability and uncertainty about even which direction he takes. He has been under considerable pressure because of the change of power that happened, whether we call it a coup or a popular movement that brought down the Muslim Brothers. There is an international pressure, and has been an international pressure, that is restricting his movement. So Egypt is going through an extremely difficult time, compounded by the relentless terrorist activities in Sinai and in Libya. And we've seen people beheaded and killed in cold blood. So unfortunately, he is taking a seemingly stringent approach. But that is, I think, anybody who is ruling the country would have to take that position, not because Sisi is a vicious man or cruel man, no, because he is under considerable pressure. And
okay, but he seems to be taking that rather enthusiastically. If I can bring you in here, Nader Amran, I mean, you know that the Muslim Brotherhood have been victim to his extreme repression, journalists, many people who've been rounded up and disappeared, as we were talking about a little bit earlier on. And I'm wondering where this leaves Muslim Brotherhood at the moment, because I'm also hearing about divisions within Muslim Brotherhood between the new leaders coming through.
Yes, Muslim Brotherhood is part and parcel from the Egyptian society. And the Egyptian society is still against what's going on in Egypt, the majority. I'm not talking on behalf of the Egyptian people, I'm talking about as a part of the Egyptian people. What has been there for 2.5 years now in Egypt is simply a military coup, a repression, authoritarian regime, and killing of thousands, rounded up or arresting unjudicially without trial for more than 50,000 people in Sisi's prisons, and above all, failure on all levels by these military generals on economy and water file, and even fighting terrorism, which was the pretext to make this military coup. He even failed to fight terror everywhere, and on all levels, people are suffering in Egypt from high prices. These people are corrupt. All the military generals are corrupt, are taking millions of pounds for their own salaries every month. And at the end of the day, they say that he's fighting terrorism. No, he's made military coup to protect the interests of the military in Egypt, which rules Egypt 63 years ago. And it's crystal clear. No need to prove this. This is the real reason not to respond to the people's need, because all the revolution partners now are behind bars. So where is the real democracy that he has built in Egypt for the 2.5 years? He's a failure, and all the military regimes are the same over the history. So he will never succeed.
Okay, so I mean, is he a failure? I mean, how weak or strong is he? Again, you're hearing of divisions when it comes to the military, when it comes to the security forces, and his relationship, his tenuous relationship with business people. Of course, the economy is in tatters.
Well, I think that clearly this regime, or the present situation, let's say, is not one where there is peace and prosperity and where there is all segments or even many segments of the political spectrum included in a way that can be functional and that can last, right? We have political exclusion, we have repression, we have a security situation that is quite real, has to be taken into consideration, and we have a deteriorating economy. And we also have none of the issues that brought on the 2011 uprising dealt with. No. Unemployment, social justice, and freedom, and so on. And so I think that means that the present situation is unsustainable. However, what that means, whether that means there will be an uprising or some social disturbances in a year or 3 years, we don't know really as social scientists, and we can't predict with any accuracy. This could go on for some time. There could be a change within the regime. There could be an attempt to include some elements of the political opposition to make the situation more stable. But is the present situation sustainable? I don't think so.
I'm wondering, Salah, where this leaves relations within the continent as well. I mean, you touched on the problems that he's having with ISIL in the Sinai, with Libya on its border. Yes. I mean, are those pressures enough to affect his position, to affect his standing and Egypt's reputation?
Of course there is pressure. I am very surprised that my friend in Istanbul is dismissing the fears about the terrorist activities in Sinai. I mean, look at the whole world. We are in a situation where the whole of the Middle East is set on fire. Look what the disaster, the humanistic crisis that's happening in Syria, and the millions of the refugees that are invading or invading Europe. The political Islam has turned into a very, very serious threat to the international peace. And Egypt is not in isolation and all of that. So we cannot really ignore that. But Egypt also has much more difficult challenges, as I said before, that the Western world, the Americans particularly, and the British were trying to support the Muslim Brothers. And they haven't forgiven the change. And that's really limiting Egypt's movement. So there is a considerable difficulty there. I agree with Samer Shehata. There is nobody happy in Egypt about what happened now. The Egyptians wanted a change, and they still want a change. But I don't think that they will revolt again now. I think they will take a stock, because the Egyptian people are deep people. They will think, and they will. The effects of that revolution will have to take their course to work through the political forces. The political forces in Egypt have made serious mistakes as well, not just the Muslim Brothers. They were disunited, they were narcissistic, they did not appreciate the challenges and the demands of the stage that went through, and they failed.
Sorry, I just want to bring in Nada here. I feel as though we're going over old ground there, but Nada, can I just ask you, I mean, where to from now? What happens to Egypt? How can it improve? What needs to be done?
Yeah, I think what we are going through now is that to continue our revolution, and people must take to the streets and must fight for their own freedom, for their own rights, for their own demands. And we will keep on doing this until this military coup is toppled and we can bring it down. And I don't think there is no other choice, peacefully and through the peaceful ways. And this is the only way that any revolution wants to succeed, is to go this way, and we get back our legitimacy and our democracy. And regarding this point of terror fighting, I think all international democracies has its own problem with terror fighting. But this has nothing to do with, they don't destroy their own democracy, their own institutions, to say that we are fighting terrorism. We can fight terrorism all over Europe and all over America as well, and the United States. But they never made a military coup and the defense minister took power and then tried to fight terrorism. This is something else. It has been there in Sinai and all the world for a very long time, and it will last for a very long time. So let's leave it with that prediction between these two things.
Samer Shehata, as you were saying, so many divisions within Egyptian society. Thank you very much for talking to us. You too, Salah, Abou-El-Fadl and Nada Omran.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. As always, you can leave your comments on the program's page of our website, aljazeera.com. You can post reviews on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can tweet us at Inside Story or at Jane Dutton. From me and the rest of the Inside Story team, thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.